This is where you come up and do the tours. Lots and lots of history here. Elmer Lee Tea, Albert Blanton, Happy Van Winkle, William LaRue Weller, George T. Stagg, Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor. And here is the Buffalo Trace Whiskey Vault, oldest in the building on the property, built in 1881, then known as Warehouse A, an early barrage storage warehouse. Inside is the historical collection of bourbons and whiskeys crafted by Buffalo Trace Distillery. Oh, that's worth a lot of money right there, huh?
How far I could reach you.
This room was specifically designed to preserve and safeguard these bottles, as well as the history in certain locations for future generations to enjoy. As the distillery continues to distill, age, and bottle its prized spirits, the vault will be opened and the bottles will be added, forfeiting its dedication to preserving its venerable craft while honoring tradition and embracing change.
Sure. Those two bottles in the very center of that table
are really old, huh?
Yep.
It's like some of those they look pretty old too.
250 years ago, two brothers, Willis and Hancock Lee, sent to explore and survey and settle this part of the country. They settled and named the place after themselves. In 1775, the Lee brothers founded the Leestown, Virginia settlement on this site. First commercial distillation occurs on this site in 1786, 1 year before the Constitutional Convention that makes Buffalo Trace the oldest continually operating distillery in the United States. And yes, that includes two periods of time along the way that knocked most everybody else out of business. First one, about 100 years ago, Prohibition, where the product we make here, intoxicating spirits, are outlawed. We stayed in production throughout Prohibition, one of only a handful of distilleries licensed by the federal government to produce and distribute a cure-all for whatever might ail. Headache, sure, all the above. Go to your doctor. He'd be more than happy to write you a prescription for 1 pint of 100 proof medicinal whiskey. Not surprised, a lot of chronic conditions facts are in Prohibition might require another trip or two to the doctor. That kept us in production throughout Prohibition. Prohibition under the leadership of this guy, Albert Blanton, who's president of the distillery, keeps us going. More importantly, what Blanton does here, 1933 Prohibition's repeal. Blanton's a businessman. He recognizes good time to be a distiller. It's back on in the United States. So Blanton embarks on a massive expansion of the distillery from 1933 for the next 15 years, adding 100 plus buildings on site here, many of which will go inside today. Second big obstacle to distillers in the United States began in the 1980s, a period of time when consumer spending patterns, consumer taste and preference changes. Demand for aged spirits, scotch, whiskeys, bourbons, collapses. That bourbon bust of the 80s puts a lot of distilleries out of business, almost us. We get down to about 40 employees here at the entire distillery. Hanging on just long enough till 1992, the privately owned family business out of New Orleans, the Sazerac Company, comes in and buys the distillery. In 1999, Sazerac renames us Buffalo Trace. Did that to honor our legacy, our heritage. On this site, the Lee brothers, other pioneers traveling through this part of the country in the 1700s, didn't have roads or highways to travel on. They would follow the migratory path of the millions of Eastern American buffalo that inhabited this part of the country. Those paths referred to as traces, the trace to and through Leestown and the Great Buffalo Trace. By the distillery in the two halves, the production, the science side of it, and then the art, the aging. A high-tech, state-of-the-art, modern, high-capacity manufacturing plant back here. Bourbon's a whiskey that you have to follow a set of rules put into place in 1964 by Congress. Whiskey can be made anywhere in the world out of any grain that can be fermented and distilled. Bourbon has to be made in the United States. Out of a recipe of grains, it's a majority corn, 51% or more corn. We call those recipes mash bills. I am safe to say we don't use 51% corn. We use a lot of corn, right? Maybe 80% corn in those three recipes. We want all that corn so that when we receive it whole, mill it, cook it in 4 giant 20,000-gallon pressure cookers, we extract the sugars out of that corn, right? Depending which mash bill, we'll add a flavoring grain, rye or wheat for another cook, add a little bit of malted barley. We're looking for an enzyme out of that barley to help with the fermentation. The result of those cooks is a sweet mash, really sweet, really sticky, all that sugar out there. Put that in a fermenter and then sour that mash. You ever hear the term sour mash? We take a portion of a previous distillation, add that back in there, lowers the pH, gives a more consistent, hospitable environment in the fermenter. So when we add yeast in there, the yeast consumes those sugars, creating alcohol. We call that fermented mash beer. All right, distiller's beer, about 10% alcohol content in that. Send that beer to the top of one of 2 40-foot tall, 7-foot diameter column stills, feed the beer in the top, strip the alcohol out of that, vaporize the alcohol, capture that back off the top, condense that back into a liquid. All right, second distillation, then ready to go into the barrels. These fermenters down here, 12 brand new 93,000 gallon fermenters, put into place about 4 years ago, built by the Vendome company out of Louisville. All right, Vendome is the preferred contractor, the crash suite, to do a lot of this distillery work. Ship these panels in, Vendome employees fabricated these fermenters in place here. 93,000 gallon capacity, each one holding in the neighborhood of 84,000 gallons. 12 of these right at 1 million gallons of mash fermented. We can strip enough alcohol out to fill 200 barrels.
So there was so much history here at the Buffalo Trace Distillery.
And it was so cool because the buffalo used to cross right here on this property.
It's a big employee. It's a big deal in this part of Central Kentucky, a private aside from employer, this bourbon boom. Really providing a lot of economic impact. They fully staffed engineering department. Vendome builds these cookers, fermenters, the new stills, gets them up and running, hands the keys over to it, and then it's up to us to keep them going. A lot of unique, one-of-a-kind pieces of equipment here. If we need a valve or a flange or a fitting or a coupling, you can't run down to a distillery depot and get one off the shelf. We got to make like every beer equipment on site here. We'll walk past our machine shop. Some of the old tool and die equipment in there, salvage off the decommissioned World War II Navy ship. We get in the neighborhood of 24 tractor trailer loads of grain a day, every day, 7 days a week. All right, most of that corn. We're on a pretty tight footprint back here. The Kentucky River, right at the banks of the river, right behind these buildings. We have 8 grain silos here. We've only got about a day and a half worth of grain on site here at any given time. Here's some of this corn that I just cropped off. It is one specific variety. It's a distiller's corn.
Oh, I'm dropping it.
A distiller's corn. Before that guy got sent out here, we took a couple of core samples out of that trailer verify this variety. More important, check the moisture content. If it's too wet, kind of gum up the bill. We have a chance about 12% moisture content in that. Releasing back here to often knocks it go. Alright, so we'll get about 20 truckloads of corn in a day. This hard hat tour, we're going to follow the route that this kernel of corn takes while it's here. This corn will be here for about 8 days.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
It was so cool to see how the corn goes through each process, from the milling of the corn to the cooking and the fermentation and then on to the distiller.
And even how much moisture is in the corn. Like they'll send it back if it has too much moisture. I mean, it's quite the complex process that it goes through. And how they can make their own parts right there with their own machine shop so that they don't have any delay in production. So they've got everything set up the way they need it. It is just Buffalo Trace is a huge operation.
It is huge. I mean, 20 truckloads of corn or wheat a day, 7 days a week. That's just massive.
And the mash cookers, I mean, these mash cookers and these fermenters were huge. I mean, they look small on the surface, but when you look down, it's stories. 20,000 gallons, I think it said that it held. That's why the joke is no swimming, because they don't want you going swimming in their fermenters.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of gross.
We actually got to taste, you could stick your finger in there and taste it.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So let's go check this out.
Now that's interesting. It looks like it's got pepper in it. It actually wasn't pepper, it was just the grain from the corn, but it looked like pepper in there.
Yeah, in the fermenter.
Now that's really bubbling.
I said that kernel of corn will be here for 8 days. Half of that time is in here. That fermentation takes about 4 days. Alright? Everything else we can turn on and off. We can turn the hammer gels on and off, uncovered, but still, this fermentation, once you add that yeast, you can't turn that off. They like baked bread at home. Everybody's around a lot of yeast baked bread at home, so you get that little half-ounce packet of yeast with staple in there. You just our little packet of yeast. Three of them. 66 down. Those are high active yeast. I'll go with the yeast bomb. You can bake bread until the end of time. I was just random. But 320 stacks, 3 cartons. We could send 8 of these to the still every 24 hours. There's not a lot going on. These are near the end, right? They're going to go to the still, I guess, later today. These are that way to go.
So that was so cool to see how the yeast actually heats that up, and you can feel that heat.
Yeah.
And then they send it through this chiller.
Yeah. Each fermenter has a chiller that cools it down to prevent the yeast from killing off.
We chill that down to about 75 degrees. It's not a cooker, it's a tank. You feel a little heat coming off here, that's just that yeast. That's that microbial action, that yeast. We'll raise the temperature in there about 20 degrees. So, a couple of things up here. Those cartons of yeast, Albert Blanton used to grow that yeast here in Vaughn. That same strain of yeast, it would take 2,400 gallons of live active yeast for each one of those fermenters.
Yeah, this was an experimental batch that they were getting ready to send to the still.
Pretty cool.
They're doing some work in here, replacing the windows, but we'll go in there and talk a little bit about this process. A little bit of that low wine in your hands and take a whip. You really smell that alcohol in there. Then rub your hands together, create a little friction. What do you smell now? I smell Fritos.
Yeah.
Right? We grew up on Fritos. Right? All that corn.
So that was really cool to see the outside, and they don't even put covers over there. They don't care if the rainwater
Yeah.
gets on there. Then they send it down and it goes to beer.
Goes into, it's turned into like a beer before it's distilled. They distill it twice, so there's a low wine and a high wine. And I believe the low wine is the first distillation. It's still a little cloudy, and they distill it again to get it to a pure alcohol.
And you can see one is darker and one is clear.
Fellow color still. Right? Full impurities, full yellow. First distillation. Second distillation behind it. This big younger, a big hot still. High wine. Crystal clear. Clear as can be. 140 proof off the doubler. I will cut that back to 125 proof to go in the barrel. It's one of two dry houses, right? Look behind you in that window. You see one of two giant grain dryers.
Predominantly, we'll take a barrel, never say never, but we'll take a barrel and leave it. These likely been right here. Have these gone to the top floor of this warehouse instead? They would have only stayed up there maybe 3 years. Really hot, really cold, a lot of aggressive aging, evaporation, 3 years, roll them all out, bottle those as benchmark. All right, benchmarks are 3-year, 80 proof, budget-friendly bourbon. Had these same barrels gone to the middle floors of this warehouse that we leave them there for 7 or 8 years, Buffalo Trace. We could have, a year ago, pulled these barrels out after 10 years and bottled those as Eagle Rare. Leave them down here another 6 years, and there's a 17-year-old. First bourbon on your map. Talked a lot about this. Buffalo Trace from Massville 1, what we saw all in process today. Buffalo Trace, a big batch. It's a large batch production bourbon where we take a lot of barrels, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of barrels of Massville 1 that have aged typically 7 to 8 years. Could come from different warehouses, likely the middle floors of those warehouses, dump them all together in a big batch. All right, filter them. The only thing you can add to bourbon is water to reduce the proof. All right. Massville 1 goes in the barrel 125 proof, probably comes out of the barrel around 130 proof. Just add water in there to cut that back, 90 proof for bond. So go ahead and take a couple of sips. Buffalo Trace. First sip a little hot, then 90 proof, then alcohol content in there. Everybody get a little spicy, peppery finish on that. It's the rye in Massville 1. Massville 1 is corn, dried, and barley. Buffalo Trace, a great example of a bourbon. You can really taste that nice, robust rye. Next bourbon on your map, different recipe. This is our wheated or Weller recipe, similar to Buffalo Trace, 7 or 8 years in the barrel. Big batch of those barrels dumped together, bottled at 90 proof. So these are just similar age, right? Same proof, 90 proof. Difference is that Massville rye versus wheat. I think you'll notice a pretty significant difference in flavor between them. You don't get that spicy, peppery finish. No rye in that. Wheat instead. Wheat's a smoother, softer drink.
I love the Blanton bottles. Everyone has a different letter, and they have different poses of the horses that you said make like the whole race if you line them up.
Right.
And you found a trick to finding those
So,
letters.
well, the trick to it is just searching in every liquor store that you happen by and just checking to see if they have any. And that's the only trick there is.
Yeah, so good luck finding those horses and those letters.
Bottle right behind us in this bottling hall. You can go peek in the windows there when we're done. A single barrel bourbon. These could be hundreds of barrels dumped together. What's in a bottle of Laffing's comes from one barrel. And this bottling hall is set up to accommodate that process. Empty a barrel, filter it, proof it, bottle it, keep the contents of that barrel separate.
through the hallway. Nashville 2, a little higher. Rye, Blanton's about 6 years old, a little bit younger, and bottled at 93 proof, so just a little higher alcohol content. Albert T. Lee introduced Blanton's in 1984 during that bourbon bust. He said, what we need around here is an expensive premium bourbon to get us on the market, get our name out there. And it got through a Hail Mary and kept us going. So they have a letter back here. I will tell you, that letter didn't come on until 1990. Every different topper in Blanton's bottle has a figure of a horse and jockey.
Okay.
And a letter. Each of the letters in Blanton's, and you're supposed to collect all 8 of them. All right? And bring them back here, and we'll mount them on a stave fork and line them up so they spell out Blanton.
So what's the trick to collecting them?
Yeah, well,
Finding them.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's how you do that. We got FDA gold.
that's the only question. How do you?
Yeah. Blanton's 6 years old, a little higher alcohol content. I think it's where he needs these. Now, just take a sip of that cream. Our take on a cream liqueur or an Irish cream, Buffalo Trace bourbon in here, real dairy cream, bottled at 30 proof. So good. So good. That root beer you poured in there, Freddie's root beer. Freddie Johnson, 3rd generation employee of the distillery. We encountered Freddie a couple times out back. He's the tour guide, a great guy. We have the soft drink sound seaters. In Freddie's name, root beer, there's no alcohol in there, just a good old-fashioned root beer. Last thing on your map, that bourbon ball, traditional Kentucky candy. Any of us raised in Kentucky grew up on bourbon balls at home around the holidays. These are made for us at Rebecca Ruth Candy here in Frankfurt. This little smidge, this little taste. So we'll trace bourbon right in there.
We'd never had a bourbon ball till last night.
You did? I did not know that.
We're from Texas, so
Oh no.
yeah, never.
When in Rome.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a view from up here of this beautiful distillery. And it is massive. What do you think, Mark? Probably one of the largest. Is it, you think, the largest?
I think it's one of the top 5 largest.
One of the top 5 largest distilleries of bourbon. One of the things Mark pointed out to us, all the black on the trees, and all the trees have it, is a fungus that has that produced.
Yeah, actually, it's a fungus that lives off of the alcohol. So when we were in the rick house and you could smell the alcohol, they call it the angel share. So that's actually alcohol that evaporates out of the barrels. So it's free-form in the air. So once it gets out of the rick houses, it's in the air around here. I'm sure sometimes some distilleries will actually spend the money to pay to have local homes that are covered with it or covered with it to have it clean.
With everywhere.
We are so excited to bring you along with us on this Kentucky Bourbon Trail journey. So join Mike and I as newbies, and Mark from the Bourbon Life podcast,
Who is only one of 5 Master of Bourbon certification in the world.
to bring you along on this journey with us. Hope you enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.